Hello everyone, welcome to this webinar presented by ESS BIZTOOLS and ESS Small Business. Potential of all female companies underestimated. This is a quotation by Andrew Geddes, a very experienced company director, the former chair of Green Cross Limited. He was the chair for 11 years. In his comments about the success of Shebah, a Melbourne-based all-female business that operates a all-female rideshare business in Melbourne, and they have raised a considerable sum of money, which we're going to share with you in a moment, by utilising crowdsourced funding equity raising. So I now want to present you the interview that I had with Andrew Geddes recently relative to the success of Shebah. Andrew, recently a company called Shebah Proprietary Limited, a company that is dedicated to operating an all-female rideshare service, raised $3 million. That's actually a record for crowdsourced funding so far. Do you think this is going to encourage other female entrepreneurs to look at the niche market they have to see whether they can do something similar?
Yes, Peter. Look, I think it's an example of a specialist niche. And I think laterally and ask, well, why aren't more accounting firms targeting as their preferred customers businesses controlled by women?
That's right.
This obviously illustrates that women have a need for secure transport for them and their families. Why can't that be extended into trusted advisory industries as well?
That's right.
So, I mean, I hope so. Again, the Australian Institute of Company Directors have just announced that the top 300 companies all have hit their targets of above 30% female representation on their boards now.
Oh, that's very good. Okay.
So it's a growing force or revolution, or is it an evolution? It's happening slowly but surely within our community, and it's a good thing.
Okay. That was a comment by Andrew Geddes relative to Shebah's success. So let's look at the success that Shebah has achieved. They created a record raising for the Australian crowdsourced funding industry of $3 million in one tranche. One other company has in fact raised a total of $5 million, but they achieved that in two separate tranches, one for $2.6 million and the other one for $2.4 million. So at this stage, Shebah has the record. Now, the company highlights, as per the information that was placed on the website of Birchall, the crowdsourced funding intermediary that acted for Shebah, showed that the company had had an 8% growth per month since 2017. That's pretty good, isn't it? They'd had 113,000 app downloads. Since inception, Shebah has offered transport in Melbourne for over 200,000 trips that only took female passengers and children, and boys in particular, only up to 7 years of age, I'm told. Obviously daughters of any age. And all of the drivers are females. So this is a rather unique business. And what is really unique is that the company was able to attract 2,107, I think was the final figure, investors, of which 94% are female. This is significantly higher than the normal female participation in capital raising activities in Australia. The crowdsourced funding intermediary was Birchall, and we're going to hear from the senior manager of Birchall, Robin Holt, now. It's my pleasure now to introduce to you Robin Holt, who's the Senior Manager at Birchall, one of the crowdsource funding intermediaries that's been appointed by the Australian Security Investment Commission. And Robin was a key advisor to Shebah in their capital raising. So how are you today, Robin?
Yeah, good. Thank you very much. Thanks for the introduction. It's good to be here.
Robin, why do you think Shebah was so successful in its capital raising endeavours?
Yeah, sure. Great way to kick off. It really does come down to the preparation and execution of the campaign. When it comes to having a successful equity crowdfunding campaign, you need to make sure that you're across so many different corners. Because the advertising restrictions are lifted, you need to make sure that you're advertising the offer in ways that are going to get in front of the right people. So you need to make sure that you've got some really, really fantastic press already secured, and Shebah had, engaged a fantastic agency to help them with that. We'd also made sure that we were very much so across social media and social ads, which was supporting that, and also across very many other different channels among social media who we were introducing to the raise itself. Now, Shebah already had a very engaged audience of drivers and riders who loved them. So that was fantastic to be able to share the campaign with them, but to support that, having the press, having the sophisticated investors or larger investors come on board and show interest in the campaign as well, really propped that up. And when you have all of those corners working very effectively, it builds really strong momentum, and it encourages everybody to come on board, really. So it's just the execution of it was, we were working very hard on that campaign every single day.
And who planned that execution? Was that Birchall, or was that done at the company level?
Yeah, I mean, look, we would sit down with Shebah on a regular basis before the campaign would launch, and we'd sit down and we'd plan all the communications that we were going to push out, plan everything that we were going to be doing through the course of the campaign itself, and then just execute on it. So it was really very much so a joint effort. Obviously, we've been through this process before. I've been through this process so many times with companies, and so I know what we need to be across, what we need to do, and how we need to execute it. So it's quite simple at the earlier stages, but it really needs to just be instilled that you've got to plan very far and ahead. The more you do upfront, the less work you're going to have to do further down the line. And if you don't plan all of that out and prepare effectively, it's just going to be a lot more hard work than it needs to be.
Thanks, Robin. Can you give our listeners some idea of the time factor? Because this company was successful and raised $3 million. What was the time factor this pre-listing work occupied?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the time factor that goes into actually, so it's almost like there's those two elements to raising through the Birchall platform. So you've got that expression of interest campaign where you're gathering all the list of people who are suggesting that they're interested in investing, the total amount they're looking to invest, and then you've got the live offer which comes straight after that. And a lot of the preparation goes into that stage before the expression of interest campaign launches, and that would tend to take around about 3 to 4 weeks. And Shebah was really no exception. It was perhaps a little bit longer from when we first initially started talking about it, but when we do get down to the work itself, I'd say we were within that time frame. Okay.
Andrew Geddes is the former chair of Green Cross Limited. In fact, he was the chair for 11 years. Has forecast that Shebah's success will encourage other female-run businesses to try to take advantage of the opportunity of raising capital, utilising crowdsource funding, equity raising. What do you think of Geddes' comments?
Oh, no, I absolutely agree. I think like we've already seen an uptake in female-founded companies applying to have conversations with us. And,
have you?
Yeah, absolutely. Reaching out to us and just saying, I saw the Shebah raise. It was so fantastic. This is what I'm doing. Can I raise funds through your platform? And that's a fantastic really response from the marketplace to really show that there are people, female-founded companies in particular, looking at this regime and seeing if it's successful for them. Because at the end of the day, there shouldn't ever be any restrictions for anyone who's going out there looking to raise capital, if they've got all the right metrics in place as a business to be able to go out there and successfully raise capital. And when it comes to equity crowdfunding, that marketplace approach kind of lifts the whole closed door approach, which sometimes you may have with certain sophisticated investors who you get that yes or no, whereas with equity crowdfunding, you have that marketplace response whereby you can go out to the market, test really the response that you're getting from your users, the general media in your space, and the market at large. And so that's where I really do think that, particular female founders who have a very attractive offering can use this regime and find it very beneficial, as opposed to just having meeting after meeting and perhaps getting that rejection which they don't want.
Okay, I understand that about 2,100 investors invested in Shebah.
Yep.
Was the overall $3 million raised primarily from Shebah's management's efforts, or was that the campaign that Birchall coordinated?
Oh, I mean, there's so much, because Shebah in and of itself had a pre-existing audience, which really obviously amplifies the chances of succeeding when it comes to an equity crowdfunding campaign. But during the EOI, we had so much strong press, and I think I kind of iterated that at the very beginning and touched on that point. Because of how effective that was, it really enabled that press to then be communicated to their audience, and they got more excited about the raise. And so while there were other people coming through, and things like people who were interested in investing into startups, I mean, I even had contacts over here who I'd never expect to have come across Shebah say that they invested into it. And that really shows the reach that we got with that campaign. And I think that there was definitely strength in Shebah having their drivers and riders already out there using the product. Yeah. And they certainly did come on board and invest. But it wasn't just them who became investors into the company. There were sophisticated investors who came through the expression of interest campaign itself and ended up actually investing in the live offer itself. So there was a wide mix of investors.
So the media interest obviously helped. Do you think the media is going to be interested in the next all-female business, or was that because Absolutely. They were so unique?
No, absolutely. They really should be, because there's so many fantastic stories to share. With Shebah, we did have, we had these great stories to be able to share because of the fact that when we were getting towards the end of the campaign, we analyzed that 94% of the investors were actually female. And that's so different compared to the rest of the market, where you'll have less than 20% of the investors into an equity crowdfunding campaign be female investors. And so that was very newsworthy, and that got picked up by the press. But there's always such a fantastic angle, and you can see that in the press that a lot of female founded companies actually attract some really strong media coverage. And so we're absolutely looking for the next female founded company to be working with to try and get some of this positive press and make a huge success out of it.
Well, we might find them for you in this webinar that this interview is going to be shown in. Obviously, you've had experience in the United Kingdom, and you might care to tell us a bit about that. But have you seen similar success from all-female companies in the United Kingdom or elsewhere around the world?
Yeah, most definitely. Oh, no, I mean, in the UK, I had the pleasure of working with a few UK-founded, female-founded companies, and they did such a fantastic job of just preparing everything. And I actually found that they were so much more organized when it came to the whole preparation of the campaign, that it was easier to work with them because we just write everything out to the degree that I kind of knew that they were always across it. And there's been I think one of my favorite case studies is a company called Collie Rice, which is now Full Green. They've expanded into the US, but Jem, the founder of Collie Rice, has effectively raised her equity crowdfunding 5 times, and she's so successfully executed an equity crowdfunding campaign. She is the benchmark of what people should do when it comes to equity crowdfunding itself. And she doesn't need anybody else to help her with it. And she's just such a remarkable fundraiser that she really has set the benchmark in the UK for a lot of people who go and raise through equity crowdfunding. So then they go and contact Gem and ask what they need to do.
Okay. Andrew Geddes, who we referred to earlier, has also made a comment in an interview that I conducted with him about 6 weeks ago. That he thinks there will be a lot less companies seeking to raise funding through an IPO, an initial public offer, in the future, because he believes crowdsourced funding, equity raising will replace a lot of the IPOs. He's also made the comment that IPOs are very expensive, and if you're on the stock exchange, it is very expensive, time-consuming, and nerve-wracking to continually keep up to date with the continual disclosure rules, etc. Do you agree that there will be some companies looking to not pursue IPOs but look at going down the crowdsourced funding path?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. I think that you only have to look at the market overseas in the US and then in the UK as well, where the UK, you've had equity crowdfunding as a regime be very successful in adopting this methodology of allowing people to include every single fundraise in through equity crowdfunding, whether it's a VC invested round or a very angel investor heavy round. And so that has stopped people from needing to go to the public markets. And coming over here to Australia, I've seen that access to capital isn't necessarily as easy as it is over there and over in the US in particular. And as a result, companies are going public much sooner than they would be if they were overseas, where they'd have much easier access to capital. And so I think that that's really what it comes down to. And equity crowdfunding not being in existence until 2018 in Australia certainly has restricted that potential opportunity for startups to be able to go out and raise funds, not only from sophisticated investors and angel investors, but also their incredibly engaged community, and to lift the advertising restrictions and going out there and get some fantastic press for their business. It's really, it's a game changer in terms of startups and providing that opportunity. And we have, looking at it, we have such a success-based model. We always sort of joke about the fact that we provide so much upfront for free. And as a business in and of itself, we really are backing ourselves to make sure that the business is successful in raising. So we don't make it a huge risk for a business to go through this process. We make it completely worth their time. And we want to be able to see them get to the next step and also get some fantastic exposure. And I think that when you look at that model, delaying going public is certainly inevitable for companies if access to finance through equity crowdfunding is so much easier.
Yeah. What would you say to female directors, managers and shareholders, but also their male contemporaries who are currently out there running a small proprietary company, might have a turnover of a few $1 million, might even be sitting up around $15 to $20 million?
Yeah.
Would you encourage them to be seriously looking at crowdsourced funding?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'd love them to get in touch and just have a conversation with us, even if they're not at a later stage of perhaps turning over $15 million, which a lot of companies in Australia certainly aren't at that stage yet. And I think that we'd probably be aware of them if they were, hopefully. But no, I think that it's always fantastic to have a conversation with people who are really hungry to get involved and raise funds through this regime. And even if they're not right for us, we'll absolutely walk them through what it takes to be successful in this regime and where they need to get to as a business. So I would 100% be giving that advice that you can take these steps to be able to go and raise funds through the regime, even if you're not quite suited to it right now.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your input today for us, Robin. Obviously, Robin is from Birchall, and we will be supplying your company's details in the webinar presentation that we are making to business operators and accountants all over Australia. So thank you very much for your time today.
No, thank you.
We'll talk to you at a later date.
Cheers.
Bye-bye. What I'd like to do now is to take you through some of the key items that Robin Holt identified. Because I know some of you are going to be ladies who are running businesses, but also men who are running businesses that are thinking about how you are going to organise your finances for your businesses. And what crowdsource funding equity raising does do is gives you the opportunity, you in your company, to be able to find the finance without having to mortgage your assets, your mother-in-law's assets, or someone else's, and enter into loan repayments, personal guarantees, and all that goes with it. So let's look at some of the key points that Robin Holt from Birchall highlighted in that interview. He stressed the desirability of getting the media involved. And Shebah had articles in a wide range of national newspapers. So that was good. They had a story to tell. And it wasn't just all because they were an all-female business. And they also had a very strong social media campaign running. So companies should be thinking about both of these items. But they got the audience engaged. Robin mentioned the drivers, the passengers were all talking about this capital raising effort that the company was undertaking. They had a fan base, is what intermediaries call this. They already had customers, they had people talking about them, they had articles in the media and social media. If you are contemplating going down this path to raise capital utilising crowdsource funding, equity raising, you need to be conscious of these matters. Now, we haven't been able to do this in the past in Australia for small proprietary companies. So there's a lot more relaxation of the rules built around crowdsource funding equity raising. And one of the very interesting comments that I heard Robin say when I interviewed him a couple of days ago was that some sophisticated investors, these are people with net worth of over $2.5 million or annual gross income in excess of $250,000 for the last 2 years, who have their accountants sign a certificate certifying that they are classified as a sophisticated investor. Some of them invested in this crowdsource funding equity raising. They weren't restricted to only $10,000 investment, but they were part of it. And that showed that people who the law says are very experienced and have good knowledge or can employ advisors with that knowledge to guide them were very impressed with the presentations that were made by Shebah. The team encouraged everyone to come on board. That was Robin's comments. So if you're contemplating doing a crowdsource funding equity raising process, you need to make sure that your team, your employees, your suppliers, your customers, your friends in the wider community, your family, are all encouraging people to get on board. It's not quite the same as raising capital on the Australian Stock Exchange, but within your sphere of influence with your fans, you can create a lot of activity, a lot of interest out there in the marketplace. Robin was very emphatic about the need for solid planning. He said it took 4 to 5 weeks. I thought it might have been a little bit longer, to be honest, but you need to block out at least 4 to 5 weeks, call it 6 weeks, to get it done properly. There will need to be time allocated for meetings with the intermediary. Now, this is all after you've got everything else prepared. You've got the business plan, the budgets, the cash flow forecast, your team structures, your crowdsource funding offer document. You've already met some intermediaries. You've decided the intermediary you're going to work with. You've signed an agreement with them. And that's when the 5 to 6 weeks of very solid involvement commences. So you need to think that through. Some people who have undertaken IPOs complain that their CEO is out of the business and some of the other key people, like the chief financial officer, for nearly a year. Well, it's not quite as bad as that, but you need to assume that the key people, the directors, the top managers are going to be closely involved in this, I suspect for around 6 weeks, to make your bid to raise capital successful. If you go on and look at a intermediary's website, you will notice that many of them have got EOIs, expression of interest campaigns. Now they run this beforehand, before the 90 days, because the actual listing can only take 90 days. They run these to find out who might be interested. You can put your name down if you want to, so you get contacted when the actual listing commences. And on the form, they'll ask you to complete with your name and your email address. They'll ask you how much money you might be contemplating investing in a particular company. So in that way, they've got an idea. They're taking this into account in planning their campaign. I've probably said this before, but Shebah basically did have an audience, a fan base, which did help them in the capital raise. So if you're thinking about utilising crowdsourced funding equity raising, and I do hope that some of you are, think about your fan base. Think about how you are going to communicate before all this starts with your customers, your suppliers, your staff, your friends and family, so that they're aware of what you are proposing to do. Robin is very happy with the success of Shebah. Not only did they raise $3 million, whereas their original target was only $1 million. The legislation allows you to do that, to nominate a minimum amount that you're trying to get, and then a maximum amount. The offer document's got to include details of what you will do with that extra money. In Shebah's case, an extra $2 million was raised over their minimum amount, but their maximum was specified at $3 million. It could have been higher, it could have been $5 million, but they specified $3 million. So I asked the question, are they seeing an increased awareness from female-run companies looking at the possibility of being able to utilize crowdsourced funding equity raising? And he said yes. They're getting calls from ladies all over Australia who are running businesses and saying, well, we've observed what Shebah did, can we do the same thing? So if you're in that boat, go for it. But please make sure you get your training and familiarization with what crowdsourced funding equity raising is before you go too far down the track. And we have some information at the end of this presentation today that will be of interest to you. The media was very important in the overall process. I've repeated myself, I know, because Robin was so emphatic that the media support was very important. Therefore, if you're going to go down this process, you need to factor into your expenses hiring of a journalist or a public relations consultant who can get your message across to the media so that the media publish those articles. And Robin mentioned the high level of female investment, 94% compared to the norm in Australia of about 20%. And I gather from what he told me off air, that's about the same around the world, around 20% female participation. But in Shebah, 94% was achieved. So if you've got a business that is catering to the female market and you can put your case together in a similar way to what Shebah did, you may well be able to raise your capital. So that's a fairly wide overview of Shebah's story. I hope that is of interest to you. And now to balance out the genders, if you like, I now want to introduce you to a gentleman who has raised capital under Section 708 of the Corporations Act and also crowdsourced funding equity raising. His name is Ben Koeman from the Endeavour Brewing Company. And good morning, Ben. How are you today?
Very well, Peter. Thank you.
Ben, you're the CEO of a company that's been able to raise capital utilising the federal government's new legal process called crowdsource funding equity raising. How have you found this process?
Overall, really exciting and really positive, and very successful. So it was a long process, but really rewarding, and we're really excited about not just what it raised during the process, but the actual benefits of it going forward.
Can you tell us a bit about Endeavour Brewing Company?
Yeah, sure. We started in 2010 as a virtual beer company. We had our own brand, recipes, and we started talking to farmers down in Tassie and Victoria about using all Australian ingredients and making beer much like wine. So looking at the best of the crop every year, tweaking our recipes every year to suit those ingredients, and producing a set of sort of vintage harvest beers. Since then, we then opened our own brew house in the Rocks in 2016, Endeavour Tap Rooms and Brew Bar. But all 8.5 years we've been shipping our beers nationally through a lot of production through our partner brewers, and a little bit of export, of which we're ramping up this year.
Okay. So what were your targets in the shareholding?
We set ourselves a capital raising window of between $1 and $3 million. We actually had a preemptive period with our existing shareholders as per our constitution. So we opened up that capital raising to them first, of which we raised $695,000. So that then changed the window for the crowdfunding part of $305,000 to $2.305 million.
And how much did you raise from crowdsource funding?
We ended up with $556,900. Sorry, $556,700. So yeah, we got above the minimum, well above the minimum, about 83% above the minimum of $305,000.
That's good. And how many new shareholders did you acquire?
Yeah, we acquired 579 new shareholders. That's on a base of, we previously had about 40 shareholders. Our company was started with 3 blokes and 35 mates. So we actually did crowdfunding before there was actually a term back in 2010. I was literally inviting mates to a pub to try beer and saying who wants to be in on a beer company. And yeah, now we've literally last Monday we settled on the share offer with Equitise, and on the Tuesday everyone got their holding statements. So now we have an active database of 608 shareholders.
Good. So that capital raising you did earlier that you referred to would have been under Section 708 of the Corporations Act.
Correct.
Yes, and it's still a very important section to work in conjunction with crowdsource funding.
Yeah, so any direct shareholders we still have to stay under that 50 shareholder cap to remain a private company. We've got, probably a roadmap to get to a public company, but at the moment the costs of compliance and extra diligence is a little bit prohibitive to a company our size. But now that we do have 608 shareholders, we'll be doing all our normal reporting. We will be doing an annual report, etc. But we're not quite a public company yet.
No. How long did the listing take for crowdsource funding? Did you take the full 90 days or was it less?
No, we went at about 60 days.
Okay.
And again, it was just because our total capital raise had a 3-month window after we closed it to existing shareholders. So we did the existing shareholders over a week. We then spent a week putting in that investment into our numbers, etc. And then we opened the crowdfunding round on November 30. Had a little private period for people, associates, staff. And then we went full public in the middle of December and closed on the 13th of February.
Very good. How many directors have you got?
We've got 3 directors. It's the original 3 blokes. So yeah, three directors. We are looking at refreshing our board, possibly getting an independent director in, and another significant shareholder maybe joining the board. So we'll go to sort of 4 or 5 directors going forward.
Did you have any pressure from any of the new shareholders to have a say in the appointment of a director, or were they happy to go with the status quo?
Oh, they were happy to go with the status quo. The biggest investor outside the existing shareholders came in at 100,000. They've got a nice little stake in the business. Percentage terms, it's not a huge stake, so they're just happy to be involved in a beer company. There's other benefits for all our shareholders now. We've formed a shareholders club called the Endeavour Crew, and depending on how much they invested, they're one of 3 tiers within that club, and they get a bit of merchandise and some discounts and some ongoing little goodies going forward, and which I think is important and really exciting to harness, hopefully, their enthusiasm in supporting their own beer company.
Some companies that are trying to raise capital as crowdsource funding are doing that. They're introducing some fringe benefits, if you like. Do you think that's important?
Oh, 100%. I think, especially for people in our space, which are consumer brands, they want to be something, not just a shareholder and, bottom drawer investment. I think they want to be, quite engaged and feel part of the brand. And definitely then we are hoping that they'll act as ultra engaged brand ambassadors out there. So especially for consumer brands, I think you need to give them something special, something exclusive. It doesn't always have to be free. It might just be first access, or it might be, and we're going to do one every year, we're going to do an exclusive shareholders beer. So they're going to actually be invited. We're going to have an annual general mashing rather than an AGM, and we're all going to get them together to brew a beer, have a few drinks, and then a few weeks later we're going to bottle or can off that beer, send it to them, and they're going to get access, or exclusive access, to buy a little bit more until the batch is all allocated. But yeah, I think for consumer brands especially, whether it be maybe a clothing brand and they want to do an exclusive shirt for their shareholders, or a watch company I saw, they were going to design an exclusive watch for their shareholders. So I think that's really important.
Okay. Do some of the shareholders turn up at the Rocks at your outlet there?
Yeah, well, we've already had half a dozen turn up who we weren't previously shareholders. A couple turned up before the settlement period. So we, of course, gave them the discount early. So we offer them a discount to come to the Endeavour tap rooms and brew bar Monday to Thursdays when we're a little bit less busy. They can get discount on the beers, obviously with responsible service of alcohol, always a high consideration. So yeah, they're definitely now can come to our home, and indeed come to their home, because they're a fully fledged shareholder.
Okay, Ben, the people who are going to watch this recording are either accountants, bookkeepers, or business advisors in one group, and the other group are people like yourself. They are currently running small businesses or medium-sized enterprises, obviously with turnovers under $25 million. Would you recommend this process to them? Would you recommend, firstly, that accountants and advisors get an understanding of it so they can help their clients? And would you think it's beneficial for small, medium-sized businesses?
Well, 100%. I think very important for accountants and advisors to understand what it all means. It's a new way of getting capital. It's not an easy way, and it's not a cheap or dodgy way of getting capital. It's a fully fledged, very sophisticated, very well thought out program that, obviously vetted by ASIC. So I think those advisors and accountants definitely, you need brands that have got, some good plans, some upward trajectories. They know exactly what they do with that extra capital. It's not just, I'll put the hat out and get some money and I'll trust us. You've got to really put out a fully fledged offer document, which is an ASIC template, and it's got a lot of caveats in there that you need to obviously honour. So, and then for the business side, definitely, we were going to raise capital this year. Late last year, 2018, and we were looking at private equity, sophisticated investors, that wholesale market for that big amount we were chasing. But then I'd been watching crowdsourced equity funding internationally, and then obviously the first public company started doing it in early 2018. When that new legislation came that if you raised less than 3 million, you could stay as a private company, that's when we instantly just changed tack and went to that model for our second part of the capital raising after the existing shareholders.
Okay. And since then, of course, that legislation's now got it that you can raise up to $5 million as a private company. And you can do that every 12 months if the market will support you and you want to raise more money. So I think it's very exciting times.
Yeah, I think you've got to be fair on your valuations as well. So
Yeah.
it's, as I said, it's not the cheap and easy and dodgy way of getting money. It is a very sophisticated model. But if you've got a good story, and we believe we had a pretty good story, we raised 1.25 million.
Very good. You did mention just earlier, I meant to come back to it, that one of your shareholders put in $100,000. Was that as part of the original capital raise under Section 708, or is he a sophisticated investor?
No, he's a sophisticated investor that we had a sort of second degree of separation to. So popped through the platform, the Equitise platform. I can remember it was a Thursday afternoon, and I instantly rang Arthur at Equitise and said, "Who's this guy?" Because we don't see all the details initially. And he said, "Oh, new customer, a new client to our platform," and we didn't know the name. So he's on my to call list now that we've settled. Get him, see how actively involved he wants to be. The existing shareholders, there was actually a couple of bigger investments than that. So, but he was the biggest, I guess, crowd investor.
Yeah, and just for clarification for the people watching this video, retail investors, who are people not described as sophisticated investors, have got an investment limit of $10,000 per company.
Correct.
Per annum. And that's really why I picked you up on that, because
Yeah.
people listening may have thought that a company could put 100,000, but they can only put that amount in to a crowdsourced funding company if that person's a sophisticated investor. So that's great.
Or wholesale. Yeah. Our average investment parcel was about $900.
Right.
So that gives you a sort of a feel. 579 new investors combined to contribute $556,000. So yeah, it was about $900 average investment.
Okay, Ben, you've got a very interesting story. Thank you very much for sharing it with us. And obviously our viewers, who are going to be people from all over Australia and accountants and business operators, all the best in the future for Endeavour Brewing Company. And obviously anyone that's watching this that's in Sydney, go down to the Rocks and find the Endeavour facility. What did you actually call it?
Endeavour Tap Rooms and Brew Bar. We're on Argyle Street in the Rocks. You can't miss us. We're right in the middle of the busy part of the Rocks on the pedestrian mall. 100 metres from the harbour, and 5 of the 8 brews beers are brewed on site and always changing.
Okay, thanks very much and have a great day. Thanks, Ben.
Thanks, Peter.
Okay, I'll just... What I wanted to do now to finish this webinar is just to run through some of the basic requirements if you're interested in exploring further raising capital as a crowdsourced funding equity raising company. Private companies and unlisted public companies are eligible if your group turnover is under $25 million per annum. Your group value of assets is under $25 million. And the company or no member of the company is listed on a stock exchange anywhere in the world. An eligible company can raise up to $5 million as a crowdsourced funding company in a 12-month period. And with market support, the company could continue to raise up to $5 million in subsequent years. But obviously, you're going to have a good story. And as Ben just alluded to then, you also have to be able to clearly outline what you will do with this money. You just cannot raise it to sit in a bank account. The government wants the money put to work. Your directors and senior managers will need an understanding of how the crowdsourced funding process works, and very importantly, what the role of the intermediaries is. There are 14 intermediary companies that have been appointed by the Australian Security Investment Commission. The majority are located in Sydney, but there are intermediaries in Melbourne, Adelaide, Perth, and the Gold Coast. Do you want some more information? Please visit www.esssmallbusiness.com.au/crowdsourcefunding/learn more, where we've got a range of material that includes free articles and articles which there is a subscription payment needs to be made. But there are free articles there, and it will give you a bit more information on what crowdsource funding equity raising is all about and what the process is. You could apply for our free white paper, Crowdsource Funding Equity Raising, by going onto our website, esssmallbusiness.com.au, and click on to the promotional article on that white paper, and we will gladly send that white paper to you. It's about 4 pages, and it will give you an overview of what crowdsource funding equity raising is about. Your accountant should be able to assist you, but if your accountant is unable to assist you to understand more about crowdsource funding equity raising, you could go onto the ESS Small Business website and click on Find an Accountant. And that will allow you to identify accountants in your postcode who have subscribed to the ESS BIZTOOLS system on crowdsource funding. So they've been through a training program, they understand it, and they are able to deliver the products to you. If you've got any further questions, please send me an email or telephone me, peter@essbiztools.com.au, or telephone 1-800-232-088. Thank you very much for joining us today in this, I think, rather unique webinar whereby we have examined the success of Shebah. We've had an experienced public company director, Andrew Geddes, comment on the success of Shebah. We were very happy to secure a senior manager from Birchall, the crowdsource funding intermediary, to take you through the process of how they went about raising that capital. And then we had Ben Koyman, the CEO of Endeavour Brewing Company, who gave you a more in-depth overview of what happened in his company's journey on being able to utilise crowdsource funding equity raising, but also Section 708 of the Corporations Act, capital raising. So thank you very much for your time today. So my last task is to say thank you and goodbye. Have a great day and good luck if your company is seeking to raise crowdsource funding. Have a great day. Goodbye.